Hello everyone, back tuning in to today's second video. So we've already had a look at some analogues for the spring. You can find the video to that on the homepage. Just scroll down a bit to leave the link ads. Later on today, that will be placed on the spring updates and forecasts page with a written post to go with it. So that'll be on that page this evening sometime. This second video is going to be having a bit of a Sunday roundup, as we often do now on a Sunday. We're going to have a look at various things. We'll see what's going on in the stratosphere, have a look at the Arctic and North Atlantic oscillations. We've got an update of the GWV.com sunspot solar tracker as well, and we'll have a look at the weather next week's 10 days also, so a lot to cram in for this second video. Before I get on with it, just say about the ads. There's links to articles on all of the pages. Have a browse, which is a click through the links. You're helping us to pay for the website, and thanks very much for doing that. There's also video ads on all of the pages. They open out within the content. If you give those a watch, you will be helping us to pay for our website. Thought to start off with the temperatures across Europe at 7:20 this morning, because finally, after many weeks this winter of being out of the cold while most of Europe is in the freezer, you can see that the freezer has come to the UK, because it was a really cold start across particularly southern and eastern parts of England, with temperatures going down to -6 there. I think a few places got even colder than that, and this is on a par now with the sort of temperatures that we've got across continental Europe. So for example, across France, Holland, Belgium, up in towards Germany, temperatures there a little bit colder, around -9, but not that far away now in terms of the cold, but we've got into the southeast of the UK anyway, compared to continental Europe. So you've been waiting for to get into the freezer. You've been waiting for the freezer to come to the UK. It has arrived. It's going to stay cold, especially in the south and the east, for the next several nights. It will warm up, I think, from around Thursday onwards, but up until then, more frosty nights to come, and probably increasingly dense freezing fog patches as well. Notice how cold it still is going down to southeastern Europe, by the way. So there's Italy, a little bit milder there. But over the Adriatic, very cold through the Balkans. I mean, down towards Greece and Turkey, they've had a really cold winter down there, and it still continues. As far as the Mediterranean is concerned, it's a little bit milder now through the Med. So Corsica, Sardinia, frost-free, as was the Balearic Islands. Into Spain, well, northern Spain still looking very cold, but that's not untypical for the north of Spain. Further south, the holiday resorts, yes, temperatures there are looking a little bit milder. So I think we are reverting to a slightly milder pattern through the Mediterranean just at the moment, after that very disruptive cold wintry weather they had through the Med earlier in the month. So just have a quick look at the GWV solar tracker. We haven't looked at this since we finished winter updates at the end of November. So to bring you up to date with what's been going on, this tracker has been created by our friend James Ackrill, by the way. So thanks to James for sending this through to us. So we can see that back when we finished winter updates, we was getting a bit of a spike in solar activity then, in sunspot numbers. We did see sunspot numbers shooting up, but through December we had a lot of very quiet activity, many days here in December and into January coming out near or completely spotless in terms of the sunspot numbers. So some went very quiet, particularly through the second half of December and into the early part of January. We had another spike upwards though. This is where we are right now, really spiking up, and it's the highest level of sunspot activity that we've seen since the end of November, I think, and into the beginning of December. So a little bit of a spike in activity going on. Of course, we know we're going down into solar minimum, but it's not a linear process. So whilst the trend goes down, whilst the overall sunspot numbers decline as moving to solar minimum, we do find that we get these spikes upwards in activity, but don't last all that long, but they do sort of reinvigorate the sunspots for a few days and then will start to decline away again. If you're interested in all of this sort of sunspot and solar activity and the impacts that it can have on the weather, we'll be doing our first Solar Sunday of the year on the 5th of February. So in, I think that's a couple of weeks' time, we'll be looking at what's happening on the sun in depth in Solar Sunday on the 5th of February. Right, let's have a look at what's happening in the stratosphere then. This is from the JMA. This is the temperature at 30 HPA over the North Pole right now. The grey line here is our trend line, and the black line shows where we've been with those temperatures at 30 HPA, which is one of the top levels of the atmosphere in the stratosphere over the North Pole. The black line shows where we've been and where we are, and we've been, well, we've started off quite warm in November with those stratospheric temperatures. We had a crash in December. Much of January has just stayed very cold at 30 HPA in the stratosphere. So we're still significantly colder than you would expect to be at this point in the year. We should be starting to lift those temperatures up now as we bottom out at the end of December, typically on average, but still very cold at 30 HPA. Where you've got cold temperatures in the stratosphere over North Pole, it tells you that the polar vortex sort of rooted in over the North Pole. So when the stratospheric temperature is cold, tends to be one of the things that goes with an increase in the polar vortex, which brings westerly winds through the Atlantic and into the UK. Go a bit higher up to 10 HPA, not quite as cold there. We did get the crash in temperature at 10 HPA. There it is. So the temperature did dip quite significantly at that point back in December. But through January, we have actually warmed things up a little bit, although we're still colder than average. But the deviation to average isn't as big as we see at 30 HPA. Nevertheless, whether it's 10 or 30 HPA, the temperature in the stratosphere over North Pole is still colder than average. However, we've got a stratospheric warming coming up, and by the end of the week, it'll be really interesting to see how far up this black line goes, but by the end of the week potentially we could be lifting that black line up to that sort of level. They always look very dramatic when we get these stratospheric warmings occurring over the North Pole on these charts. So about Thursday, Friday, Saturday next week, that chart is going to do something very interesting. If you have a look at the latest forecast from the GFS for those temperatures in the stratosphere at 10 HPA, this is where we're starting off right now with these blue colours showing the cold stratospheric temperatures still there over North Pole. We know it's a bit colder than average at 10 HPA, but not as cold to average as it is at 30 HPA, which is slightly lower down. Let's run through and see what the latest forecast is from the GFS model going up to the 25th. Staying quite cold in the stratosphere. A little bit of warming occurring over here, but not really pushing into the North Pole itself. However, here we go, 27th of January. This has been very well predicted by the GFS model right from 384 hours away. It's been predicting this dramatic warming to occur across Siberia on the 27th of January. It's still down to that exact day as well that this all starts to kick off. So there's those red colours appearing in the stratosphere over Siberia on the 27th of January. And then we run through to the 28th and on the 29th, you see those bright colours are pushing into the pole itself. So a dramatic warming is taking place there in the stratosphere over the North Pole at 10 HPA through the 28th into the 29th of January. Now, you notice these blue colours, they don't completely go. They don't go, they just push down in towards the Atlantic. So that's the cold temperatures at 10 HPA being pushed out of the North Pole and down in towards the Atlantic and Europe. So we're not destroying those cold temperatures. We're not killing the polar vortex with this. We are disrupting it, we're moving it about, but it's not a killing blow, I don't think, at this stage. If we move on to the extended range of the GFS, so this is how we're looking on the 30th of January. Again, very warm over the top of the pole at this point in the stratosphere. And then running through, again, you notice those blue colours, they're not going away, they're still there, they're just disrupted, they're pushed out of the pole and down towards the mid-latitudes as it stays fairly warm at 10 HPA over the North Pole itself, and that's how we finish up on the 7th of February. Still looking pretty warm really over North Pole, but again, the blue colours, they haven't completely gone, haven't been obliterated. So this isn't like what we saw in January 2013, for example, which was a complete split and destruction of the stratospheric polar vortex, which eventually led to a very cold pattern getting entrenched through the latter part of winter 2012, 2013 and into March, which was exceptionally cold. I don't think we'll be seeing anything as dramatic as that, famous last words. Don't think we'll be seeing anything as dramatic as that, but this should have quite a big impact, I would have thought, and I suspect somewhere will be turning cold in the Northern Hemisphere through February. Where that is, of course, we can't predict at this stage. That was the GFS. This is the stratospheric diagnostic page from the University of Berlin website based on the ECMWF model. So again, same idea. These are the temperatures at 10 HPA. We're starting off on the 25th of January, where we've got that slight warming occurring over there, but the main blue colours are still there over the top of the North Pole on the 25th of January. As we get through into the 26th, still those blue colours there over the top of the pole, cold temperatures, but there we are on the 27th. There's the stratospheric warming occurring across Siberia. So both models were in agreement, but it's 27th of January that we're interested in. I think that's Friday. That's when this all begins to kick off. Then we go through into 28th, where those red colours are penetrating in towards the North Pole. So temperatures are shooting up at 10 HPA, that top level of the atmosphere in the stratosphere over the North Pole. And then the red colours are still there over the top of the pole as we go through towards the end of the month. This is the 30th of January, with those red colours there right over top of the pole. That black cross represents the actual North Pole. So you see this is going right the way into the top of the polar region. But same as with the GFS, we're not completely getting rid of these blue colours. They're still there, they're just being pushed out of the pole. So this is telling us that the polar vortex isn't going away, it's just being shunted and attacked really, and given a really good kicking, but it's not being totally obliterated as we saw, for example, in 2013. That's how we finish up with these charts, looking at the stratosphere 10 HPA with the ECMWF. Again, still looking really quite warm indeed over top of the pole. So it takes about 2 or 3 weeks to warm the stratosphere before we start to see a response in the troposphere. That's the level of the atmosphere where weather is going on. So don't expect an immediate response. I think it'll be more towards the middle and second half of February if we do see a response to something colder, potentially some blocking. It'll be in the second half of February that we see that rather than the first half, and then probably going on into March. I wouldn't expect anything as extreme as we had in 2013, but it might be enough this to take us into something quite cold for the second half of February. We'll have to wait and see. In terms of what's happening in the Arctic, this is the Arctic Oscillation Observed and Forecast chart. The black line here tells us where we've been with the Arctic Oscillation. The red lines at the end tells us where we're forecast to go with the Arctic Oscillation. Remember, this isn't driving anything, it's just an index that's reflecting what the atmosphere is doing in the North Pole, if you like, as with all of these indexes that we use in meteorology. They don't drive anything, they just tell you what the atmosphere is doing. So, since the start of December, we've been generally quite positive with the Arctic Oscillation. There we are, the black line above neutral being just here. So, we've had a lot of low pressure in the North Pole. I haven't had a great deal of blocking. The latest that we're forecasting to stay positive with the Arctic Oscillation as well. The red lines here, which are each an individual member of the GFS ensemble, generally staying above neutral through to the start of February. So at the moment, there's no sign of a response in terms of the Arctic Oscillation to this stratospheric warming that's on the way over the North Pole at the end of the week. There's no sign of the Arctic Oscillation showing blocking yet, but it's very early days. The warming hasn't even occurred, and it's normally a couple of weeks on before you see a response in the troposphere. Don't always get a response in the troposphere, by the way, to a stratospheric warming. Sometimes it doesn't propagate down, so that will be another question, whether we get this down into the troposphere. But if we do anyway, it's normally a couple of weeks on before you get a response, so you wouldn't expect these charts to be trending into a negative Arctic oscillation just yet. Remember, when we've got a negative Arctic oscillation, we've got blocking over the pole. North Atlantic Oscillation is the same idea. The black line here is where we've been with the NAO. The red line's at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the North Atlantic Oscillation to go. So through December, we was actually negative with the NAO, while we was positive with the AO. That's something that doesn't happen very often, that you get the two indexes against one another like that. So in terms of what the Atlantic was doing, we very nearly had a cold month in December. We just didn't have the blocking over the Arctic to push out the cold from the North Pole. Through January, we can see we've been more or less positive with the NAO, in sync then with the Arctic Oscillation, and the forecast at the end. So we are going to go a little bit negative with the NAO for a few days in the coming week, but then we're going positive at the end of the month and in the start of February, quite strongly positive as well. So again, the North Atlantic Oscillation and the Arctic Oscillation are not yet showing any response to this stratospheric warming, but again, you wouldn't really expect to be seeing a response. So as we've got the North Atlantic Oscillations and the Arctic Oscillation in positive territory, you would expect the westerlies to be strengthening, because remember, it's the weather that's driving the index, and you would expect, if we're strengthening westerlies, to be getting mild weather, and that's what the GFS ensembles are showing. So the red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average. We're cold and average at the moment. We've got a few more days of cold and average conditions to enjoy or endure, comparing depending on your point of view. That runs up towards around Thursday, Friday for the southeast, and then after that we're going milder than average. So for the end of January into start of February, yes, the temperatures are lifting up, and they're staying milder than average then through the first part of February, above the red line, above the 30-year temperature average. And there's no real sign of anything cold there through to the end of the graph, which takes us probably to around the end of the first week of February. So again, the GFS ensembles are not reflecting this stratospheric warming in terms of getting temperatures going colder at this stage. But again, you wouldn't really expect a response to be showing up with the model output at this point. So this is how the GFS is seeing things for Thursday. We're still close to high pressure in the south and east on Thursday, still looking dry and cold there. Further north and west, the Atlantic is attacking, it's trying to get in. And as we go through to Friday and then on into next weekend, we go into an Atlantic flow. This is bringing outbreaks of rain across the country, quite strong winds as well, particularly so for the north and west, and a much milder push of air coming in off the Atlantic there on Saturday, the 28th of January. We go through to Sunday 29th, and that looks unsettled in a westerly flow. The south particularly would be very mild with this. Yeah, it is coming up from the Azores. So very mild, probably quite wet, especially for the north and west next weekend. Into the end of January, so this is Monday 30th of January, and we find again low pressure is piling in off the Atlantic, so it looks like we're ending January on an unsettled note, and that takes us into the start of February. This is day 10, which is Wednesday the 1st of February. Low pressure is dominating. We're in proper zonal flow there, really. We've got low pressure to north of Scotland. This next one is downstream, and just here we're probably getting another one going around Newfoundland. So that looks a proper westerly entrenched flow setting up there for the end of January and into the start of February. ECWF is very similar. The high pressure is still clinging on Thursday to the south, and the east still dry, cold and frosty then, but it's milder, much milder actually, to the north and west, with the Atlantic encroaching all the time. We go through to the end of next week, and the Atlantic does break through, although for the south, even on Saturday, there is a suggestion that pressure is quite high there to 1025 millibars, so not breaking the Atlantic through with the ECMWF quite as much at the end of the week as the GFS is doing. But it is turning significantly milder, and eventually we finish up going quite unsettled as well. This is Monday 30th of January with the ECMWF, and the low pressures are coming in then as this ridge is finally, it takes a bit longer, but the ridge is finally being broken down. And that takes us up to day 10, which is Wednesday 1st February. Looks very unsettled by that point. Jet stream might be starting to go a little bit more to the south, so we might be starting to bring some slightly colder air down from the north, and we actually picked this up a little bit more with the GEM. So on Thursday again, lots of high pressure to the east, cold, dry and frosty, milder with rain out to the north and west. We go through to next weekend, and the Atlantic breaks through. We go into this mild west-southwesterly flow. But what happens as we go through to the end of January, this is Monday 30th of January, 192 hours, is that the jet stream is increasingly starting to push southwards, going on a more northwest-southeast trajectory. The black line here is where the jet stream is, and you see that it is running down to the south of the country, going in towards the Bay of Biscay and France. This is starting to allow colder air to begin to push out from the north into those areas of low pressure. It's not a classic cold setup by any means, but it is a signal that jet stream is beginning to shift southwards and starting to go into a spell of cold zonality. That might be the first response to the stratospheric warming, but I think it's a bit early for that. So I don't think that's a response to the stratospheric warming. But it could be what happens through the early part of February is that the first response to that stratospheric warming is to start to turn things colder via the Atlantic. So just as jet stream shifts more and more south, no real blocking, but jet stream just trends southwards, and we begin, particularly for northern parts of the country, to pull colder air into the areas of low pressure. Finally, just have a look at the CFS V2 for the next couple of months. This is 700 millibar height anomaly forecast for February. This is what it's seeing. Quite a lot of orange, bright colours, orange and red, up to the north, so it is seeing some blocking developing up to the north. But what it actually has is a deep trough sitting just to our west, so this looks very Atlantic driven, quite an unsettled month, not overly cold, but we would have to keep an eye on these yellow, orange and red colours that are up to the north. If they strengthen any more than that, they could start to push colder air into this trough, especially later on in the month. And March is actually looking even more blocked. Look at that, we get a lot of red appearing to the north of us, through Greenland going over towards Scandinavia during March. Still that trough out to the west, so the model still wants to be bringing in a mild southwesterly flow. It seems with the CFS, whatever the pattern is doing, it's going to find a way to keep us in mild air. But that is very extensive northern blocking that's showing up there now for March with the CFS V2. That might be the model picking up on that stratospheric warming. I'm not sure. You can't say, but one thing certainly leads to another. But it is interesting, but as this stratospheric warming has been getting closer and closer, we've been seeing CFS V2 on these 700 millibar height anomalies showing up more and more blocking. And with that level of red blocking up to the north, we would certainly have to be thinking about the chance of bringing colder air into the UK. Then, of course, even with blocking, it can sometimes be that we find ourselves on the mild side of blocking, as that is doing actually, and we don't get into the cold air. We'd be very unlucky, I think, with that level of above average heights to the north to find ourselves in that situation. But you never quite know. Sometimes the weather gods do conspire to ensure that even if there's a load of blocking over the Arctic, we still somehow manage to stay on the mild side of it. So that's how it's looking for the next week, 10 days. We've got the stratospheric warming coming up at the end of the week. We'll keep an eye on that, of course. And then after that, we're going to wait and see what the response is, probably around the middle and second half of February, if there is a response. In the meantime, Cold weather running up to Thursday for the south and the east, after that the Atlantic coming back, taking us through to the end of the month on a milder and much more unsettled note. Right, been a long one today, a lot to cram in. Hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to check out the spring analogues if you'd like to do that. And that's all for now. Thanks for watching.